The Brooklyn Nets, they are trading James Harden to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks, sources tell ESPN. The Nets are including Paul Millsap in the deal, too. Woj is just reporting.
Brooklyn Nets GM Sean Marks is working with Kevin Durant and his business manager Rich Kleiman on finding a trade for the franchise star. Apparently Durant requested a trade from the Nets today.
The Brooklyn Nets are trading Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks. Mavs in return will receive Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a package of picks in return. That haul includes a 2027 second-round pick and a first and second-round pick in 2029. The trade ends a 4-year run for Kyrie and Brooklyn, and with that, he now takes his talents out to Dallas in the West Conference to join a squad that is 6th in the Western Conference currently. You take a look at that package. Markieff Morris also will be heading to the Mavs to join forces with Kyrie and now Luka Doncic out there in Dallas. The Nets, we mentioned, in return will get Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a few picks highlighted by that unprotected first-round selection in 2029.
Breaking news. Late night on the West Coast, early morning on the East Coast. The Nets, they're no more, at least as they started this season.
It's KD, I get it. Like, I 100% get it. That's just how it is. I'd rather be happy I got traded for KD than probably like somebody else who I didn't think would be good or something like that. Obviously, I'll miss everybody there, miss my home, miss all my friends. I get it. Like you getting Kevin Durant, bro. Like, maybe I'll probably make that trade too.
Got a true point guard mentality.
Cam Johnson, a three to start things off for his Nets career. And a steal by Bridges, and he puts it back in. And Mikal Bridges talking to the crowd.
We may be witnessing the birth of the next NBA star in Mikal Bridges. Brooklyn Bridges is enough of a foundation to believe the Nets didn't lose the KD trade, and his career-high 45 points shows what he might be capable of with more opportunity. Bridges has a pull-up game, can shoot the three, is good in transition, can initiate the offense as a ball handler, never stops moving, and is elite defensively. He started to flash some of this when Devin Booker was out in Phoenix, and there's a reason teams reportedly offered Brooklyn 4 first-round picks. But I don't think he's going anywhere, because ironically enough, Bridges could become a bigger star away from the Suns.
Well, I talked to somebody close to the former LSU star. Shout out LSU. I would say he's in the final stage of prep for the season, and he has passed every benchmark and is as healthy as he has ever been since his last year in Philly. Brooklyn has been incredibly supportive, and the plan is for him to be the Nets' point guard and primary ball handler this coming season. The expectation is he will fully resume his career at the level he has prior to leaving Philadelphia.
The Brooklyn Nets might just be the most interesting team entering the 2024 NBA season, with the team reminiscent of the years when D'Angelo Russell was helping lead this team to the playoffs behind the bench mob of Jared Dudley and the super young fun talent that team had. Now they're back in that same stage. Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to get right into things here today. Now, obviously, we are talking about the Brooklyn Nets of a whole today, as we, kind of typically do here. But really the number one guy you have to talk about when you're talking about the Brooklyn Nets is Mikal Bridges, right? Acquired last season from the Phoenix Suns in the massive Kevin Durant trade, in which we saw, his time in Phoenix, he started to be able to show a little bit more self-creation and such. Averaged 17 points per game, was on track for his best season alone before being traded, was traded and was able to amp that up to 26 points per game once he got to Brooklyn, which gave him a 20 point per game average on the season. And that alone, if he can average 27 or 28, which wouldn't be much of a jump from what he did to end the season in Brooklyn, would immediately put him in most improved player conversations. Actually, something super interesting too, because when you look at star players around the league, there's, load management. I think your key example for that would be Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, right? But most stars typically are missing at least 10 games a season. Mikal Bridges played more than a full regular season last year. He played 83 games. Now, obviously, that's only possible because he was traded from, the Suns to the Nets after the Suns had played more games than the Nets at that time. But it's kind of something interesting to think about because this is a reliable star player. Like, he can be there night in and night out for you. And, obviously he kept that track record of being able to play that many games by playing like 4 seconds in his last game for the Nets or whatever. But it's still something to know. Like, this guy's going to show up and he's always going to be available for your team, which, if your best player is always available for you, then that always gives you a chance to win the game, right? That's just something that's super simple. I think he's going to be huge for this team in this upcoming season. Last year averaged 20 points per game total, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 46% from the field, and 38% from 3, along with 89% from the free throw line. But again, when we look at what he did in Brooklyn, pretty much all those stats go up. His field goal percentage went up with more shot attempts. His three-point percentage barely dipped with more shot attempts. And his free throw percentage stayed relatively the same, except doubled in the amount that he was taking. And then obviously we talked about his points per game going up almost 10 points per game just in that shift from Phoenix to Brooklyn. So yeah, I think he's a star player. I definitely think he's got a very, very good chance to make the All-Star team this next season. Especially if Brooklyn is in the playoffs, and it's not that they don't have a playoff roster. And we'll kind of get into some of the more nitty gritty with why this team should be a playoff team this next season here in a minute. But the other guy I want to talk about real quick is Cam Johnson. Obviously traded over with Mikal Bridges in that trade for Kevin Durant. And last year we saw something similar where when he got to Brooklyn, he was more successful than when he was in Phoenix. Not by as much of a margin, not to the point where you're like, oh, this guy is probably a star for them. But it was enough to get him paid a pretty good contract this offseason, in which he got paid about $95 million with, enough incentive to get him over the $100 million mark. So shout out to him for getting paid. And a big reason for that is his three-point shooting, right? On his career, currently, he's averaging 39% from 3. Last season, he averaged 40% from 3. That's elite numbers, especially in today's game, where this guy's taken... once he got to Brooklyn last year, he was taking almost 6 attempts a game at a 37% clip. So it did go down once he got to Brooklyn. But when he was in Phoenix, he was shooting about 4.5 a game at a 45% clip. So something to note. But yeah, I mean, he in Phoenix was averaging 13 points per game, gets to Brooklyn, was averaging 16, and that's on lesser percentages from the field, right? So, maybe that larger role quite isn't for him. But that shouldn't matter because they should have Ben Simmons coming back this next season. Regardless, I think he's going to be a great shooter for them and, should be able to continue to help space the floor. Spacing is never a bad thing to have in today's game. And obviously they did lose some shooters who we'll get into here in a minute, in which Cam Johnson's role becomes incredibly more important for this team. Because, like I said, Ben Simmons should be coming back. Now, according to reports from ESPN, specifically ESPN's Sean Marks, is the former 3-time All-Star who's battled back issues the past 2 seasons, is, quote, as healthy as he's ever been since his last year with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, that's very interesting to know because what we knew that he had some lingering injuries or whatever with his back. He ended up getting surgery, and actually Mikal Bridges was just on Podcast P with Paul George, and he kind of talked about this, where he was kind of talking about how it was almost like kind of a weight off Ben Simmons' shoulders to see, like, oh, once the doctor said, hey, yeah, you need surgery or whatever, right, to kind of see like he wasn't delusional in this because of all the hate that he was getting. So that is something to know. Obviously, personally, I think if he just has the mentality where he's going to attack the basket, he doesn't care what people think when he shoots, and he just works on it, right, he can be one of the best players in the NBA. We know that an aggressive Ben Simmons who is just out there having fun playing basketball is an all-star level player because he made the all-star team with the with the Philadelphia 76ers. He's a 3-time all-star at this point in his career. He's 2-time all-defense. Like, this guy is a guy that can be very, very good. He was a number 1 pick for a reason, right? He had insane hype coming out of LSU. And even prior to that, when he was in high school, he had insane hype. He was shooting it in high school and in LSU. He shot it in summer league, and it just, once he got to the NBA, that just wasn't there. So I'm not even worried if the shooting ever comes around. Would I at least like him to just, even if it doesn't come around, still shoot it so that, his 13% from 3 on his career he can make it. You know what I mean? They can't just leave him completely wide open to the point where they're guarding him from inside the paint, as we started to see happen. But yeah, last year when he did play, he averaged his worst numbers of his career, all career lows: 6.9 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, and 6.1 assists on 56% from the field and 43% from the line. Has never been a great free throw shooter, so if that will come around, is similar to the shot. Now it should be easier. He shot, upwards of 62% in his career from the free throw line, which is a lot better than 40%, although still not good. Yeah, I don't think at this point we should expect the shot to come around. I think all anybody wants to see from Ben Simmons is, his ability to just play defense, right? He averaged career lows in steals as well last year at 1.3 steals, and a tied career low in blocks at 0.6. But yeah, play defense and just be aggressive, because we know he has, elite playmaking skills that if he's aggressive, he's going to get the ball out. Now, obviously, you can make that joke of, well, he was aggressive against, the Atlanta Hawks, and he was so aggressive and believed so much in his playmaking, he gave up a wide open layup. And that's true. That did happen, right? I do think this is really the last chance I'm giving Ben Simmons. He's 26 now, or he'll be 27 this next season. He just turned 27 a couple weeks ago. So happy late birthday to you, Ben. But yeah, this is really the last chance I think we can kind of give Ben Simmons when it comes to becoming a star player for this team, or in general. And if he's not going to be aggressive, and if he's not going to, just go out there and do his thing with this young team who doesn't have the expectations of winning a championship like there might have been with, the Philadelphia 76ers when he was there, where anything he adds to this team is really considered a bonus, because from an outside perspective, I think all entering the season baseline, we're expecting him to be awful, right? We're expecting him to have those career lows like he did last year and pretty much be, a backup power forward. That's what the numbers would say. That's based on, 6 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. A backup power forward that can play make a little bit. Because he wasn't playing elite level defense at that same time, right? Obviously a career low in steals as well. And so if he's that much and he's still expecting to get paid as much as he is, when his contract's up, he'll be out of the league, if that's his expectation. So really, as much as this is, kind of the last chance I can give Ben Simmons of like, okay, you know what? You're healthy now. You're entering the season. You seem to be closer with the team than you've been in the past. Just go out there, have fun, play basketball, and do it at a high level, because simply when you're having fun playing basketball, it is high-level basketball. That's just how good of a player he can be. If you're not going to do that, though, don't expect to get another contract in this league anywhere near the contract you have, and you will probably quickly be out of the league if he can't, get his mind right, because that's the most important thing. As much as it would be amazing to see Ben Simmons shoot, and as much as honestly limitless potential he can have if he were to shoot the basketball, he just has to get his mind right and just go out there and play basketball and just have fun with it at the end of the day, because that would put him right back in All-Star conversations and be huge for this team. Because alongside Mikal Bridges, who is a guy that can shoot and would probably be your number one option, maybe not your primary ball handler, because Ben Simmons' ability to play make is up there. But that would give you 2 All-Stars, right? That would give you 2 all-defensive players, and both guys that can switch 1 through 4, and Ben Simmons can even occasionally defend the 5. So, that's really, really good for a baseline for a team, especially when you look at what Ben Simmons just turned 27, and Mikal Bridges turns 27 in, a month or so. So, yeah, at the end of August, he turns 27. So, these guys are pretty much the same age. They're both 27. They're just entering their primes. And that's a fantastic building pieces for a team that just traded away some of the best players in NBA history in Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant to be right back at it with 2 super young defensive all-stars is not something you see very often, because when you look at some of their teams that traded away star players, I mean, let's look at James Harden, for example. The Houston Rockets have been god-awful since they got rid of James Harden because they didn't receive anything like this. Now, obviously, Ben Simmons was rumored to be traded there, which would have put James Harden with the Sixers way before he got there, but they didn't get that. They just got the slew of picks from Brooklyn, and it didn't end up working out really for either team, because Brooklyn ended up having to trade Harden later on, and then the Rockets, they were able to go into a rebuild, and hopefully they'll have a better season this year, but they've been terrible as well since. But yeah, I mean, those two guys are your main guys, right? Obviously, having Ben Simmons again kind of goes back into how much more important Cam Johnson will be for them this year. But there are other guys on this roster, and there are other young guys on this roster that are going to be able to contribute. The number one guy I think of after those first three is Nic Claxton. Nic Claxton has developed into one of the best defensive centers in the league. There's a reason he got paid by this team. He's only 24 years old. And last year, we saw him put up 12 points per game, which is a career high. We saw him put up 1.9 assists. We saw him put up 9.2 rebounds. And then on the defensive end, he was putting up almost a steal a game as a career high. And then 2.5 blocks, a by far career high, almost doubling his previous career high. Again, one of the best defensive centers in the league. He has that Bam Adebayo switchability where he can guard the perimeter, he can guard the paint, as well as, 2.5 blocks per game. You're an elite shot blocker in the league, right? Shot it over 70% from the field. Absolutely amazing efficiency. I'm not worried that he's not shooting threes. He's a center. I get it. Yes, some centers are able to space the floor more than he is, and that does, make it a little bit more clunky playing next to Simmons, but he's such a good pick and roller. He's a lob threat. I think there's ways that can be worked around and minimized, right? Especially with good shooters in Mikal and Cam on the court with them. If you're looking at the typical starting lineup that this team should have, because Ben Simmons is projected to obviously be their starting point guard for this next season, which again, 6'10" at a starting point guard. I assume Spencer Dinwiddie, who we'll talk about here in a second, at 6'5" would be your starting shooting guard. Mikal Bridges at 6'6" at your starting small forward. Cam Johnson at 6'8" as your starting power forward. And then Nic Claxton at 6'11" as your starting center. That's a very switchable team. Like, you can switch a lot with that team, which I think we saw them try to implement last year in the playoffs, where they were throwing like Royce O'Neale out there at center occasionally, and it was interesting. You would just see them switch everything. They would get into a zone or whatever because they had just so many lengthy forwards that were good at defense. It was like, well, our best defensive lineup is a bunch of guys that are 6'7", 6'8". Let's just put them out there and see what happens. And actually, it did, sometimes hold success against Joel Embiid. There was also times in which, Joel Embiid was just kind of able to manhandle that, which makes sense, right? There's a reason he's one of the best centers in the league, and technically last year's MVP. But yeah, into Spencer Dinwiddie, again, a guy that we know who he is at this point in his career. Averaged 17 points per game last season. He struggled a little bit once he went to Washington, and he was decent for Dallas. But, getting back to form as he was back in 2019-2020 with Brooklyn, where he averaged over 20 points per game. Once he got back to Brooklyn last year, he averaged 16. And yeah, I think he will be good for this team. Again, like I said, we know what he is at this point. But that's a very, very good role player who, is only 30 years old and still will be, I think, very good for this team and will mesh well, I think, personality-wise with a lot of the guys there. I mean, they're younger than him, but only by a couple years. So this team should be pretty close-knit, which should be great for chemistry, especially when you're talking an 82-game season in which, night in and night out, it's really about, just coming out, putting your best foot forward and giving yourself a chance to win down the stretch with some of your star players, which obviously I think they have, as long as they're playing as they did last year, or as the potential we've seen them do in the past. Beyond that, another switchable guy, Dorian Finney-Smith. honestly a guy I see definitely probably getting traded around the trade deadline. He just has too much trade value, especially considering you're probably going to be able to at least get a first-round pick back for him. He's 30 years old. He probably wants to be on a contender. We know how effective he was for Dallas, and how much of a loss he was for Dallas. I mean, even now, heading into a whole nother season later, they picked up all these defensive players or whatever, but it's like, nobody quite replaces what Dorian Finney-Smith did for them. And that's huge to think about, his ability to hit the three-point shot, his ability to defend. It's all there. He's your typical 3-and-D guy. Although he just provides a little bit more. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of spark that he just seems to have, where he provides a little bit more than just your typical 3-and-D guy. But yeah, I think definitely look at him to be moved, because again, this team still is young. So, if they're a top 4 seed, maybe you don't see him shipped off. But there will definitely be teams calling about him. That's for sure. Another defensive guy who we saw them actually trade for as well last season, the infamous Royce O'Neale trade, in which they gave up a first-round pick right before trading away Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Kind of funny when you look back on it. He's 30 years old as well. Obviously, they brought him in to contend, and then it was like, oh, shoot, we're not going to be contending. So I guess kind of a mess up when it comes to their, front office there. But he was decent last year, averaged 8 points per game, shot 38% from 3. Yeah, I mean, we know he's a really good defender. He's been a good defender since he was in Utah. Really, his whole career has been made out of being a defender, and I think he'll continue to be that. A guy who I also could see being shopped at the deadline. I don't think you'll get a first-round pick back for him, as you had to give up for him. But if this team isn't quite performing to where they want, maybe they want to get a little bit younger, even if they think that they have a chance to win one playoff series or something like that. I would expect him to still as well, at least be in the market to be traded, probably more for like a younger asset or something like that than necessarily getting a first round pick back. But if we want to talk about young assets, this team has Cam Thomas. Now this guy, he had such an up and down season last year. Only 21 years old. He'll be 22 entering this next season, or he'll turn 22 in this next season. Would it be a better way to put that? But he averaged 10 points per game last year, but that does not tell the full story, because he became one of the first players in NBA history to do what he did, where I think it was like 3 games in a row consecutively with like 40 or 50 points. I mean, for like a week there, it was like Cam Thomas was like the best player in the NBA. And we're talking about an NBA that has Nikola Jokic, has LeBron James, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid, Giannis, right, etc. And Cam Thomas for like a week was like the best player in basketball. He couldn't be stopped. I know it was interesting, again, back to that podcast where Mikal Bridges was just on. He was talking about, some of the wild shots that Cam Thomas will throw up. And he's like, yeah, I thought it was like just pure luck. But once I got there, I actually saw him doing it in practice. And I was like, oh, okay, you actually practice these wild shots. This makes more sense. I understand why you're so difficult to guard. But at the same time, Cam Thomas only played 57 games last year, and that wasn't just because of injury. He was getting he was getting games where he wasn't playing. He was getting coached DNPs, right? Some of that comes down to defense. Maybe there's something locker room wise. I'm not sure. He seems to be a pretty good locker room guy. But he was, a former first-round pick by the Nets, picked 27th overall, has developed, I think, beyond that when you look at the fact that he can score 40 in a game seamlessly, right? So definitely one of the guys that I think has the most potential beyond Mikal and Simmons. And really, it's just going to be like, okay, are we actually playing him, or what's going on this season? So I think that would be the biggest question mark is he going to be on the court? And when he's on the court, is he able to replicate a level to what he did, last season, even just during that week stretch? I'm not expecting him to average 40 points per game, but if he can replicate that occasionally, where he gets 40 points, he could easily be a 20 point per game scorer for this team. Easily. He definitely has that potential. Definitely has that potential. But that's really kind of your main guys that you have from last year's team coming back that are going to be main contributors. Again, they had quite a lot of losses this offseason, where we saw them trade away Patty Mills, who Ben got traded again the same week. He got traded like 3 or 4 times in a week. He's now on the Atlanta Hawks, though. So they traded away Patty Mills. They traded away Joe Harris, who I think is actually going to be very good for the Detroit Pistons. A good pickup there for them. Again, just trying to accumulate back some draft capital. They don't really have anymore. After the fact that they traded for, all the star players. Now, yeah, they got picks back for KD and such. But they don't own a lot of their own picks, and so it's kind of a weird stage that Brooklyn's in for the next few years where they can still be competitive, and if one of those teams that they did get a pick back from is bad, they might end up with top picks. So they're kind of relying on others' failure to have success of their own. So they have picked up a few second-round picks with those trades. They also waived Edmund Summer, who I think is a decent player. I'm sure he'll get a contract somewhere. Seth Curry walked and went back to the Dallas Mavericks, where he had some of his best basketball played. And David Duke also left. As for guys that they brought obviously back Cam Johnson. They brought in Dennis Smith, who we'll talk here in a second. They brought in Lonnie Walker. They brought in Darius Baisley, who might be their biggest free agent signing. And that's kind of your main guys that they brought in. But yeah, let's jump right into them. Let's start with Darius Baisley, who I think was probably their best free agent signing. Obviously a former first round pick by the Utah Jazz. Played his pretty much whole career in OKC up till this point, until last year he had a little stint with Phoenix. OKC kind of gave up on him. He showed more promise really early in his career, where he's averaging 13 points per game at only 20 years old in OKC. Again, he's only 23 now. Just turned 23 like 2 months ago. It's not like he's about to be 24, 25. No, this kid is only 23 years old, and he can hoop. He, I think, has a lot of potential at the power forward position. Hopefully he can get a little bit more run. Again, that's where Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neale become a little bit more expendable, especially if Darius Baisley is able to show a little bit more and show that this team should keep him and kind of maybe mold him into your future plans. Because, again, without having a lot of those picks that you own yourself, kind of trying to find some talent that's been given up on by said team here, said team there, can kind of help rejuvenate this team, and is very similar to what Brooklyn has had to do in the past. Following the Paul Pierce KG trade, they didn't have any picks as well, but they were still able to build a team into a playoff team with an All-Star and such, before obviously going out and getting Kyrie and KD, right? So I think Darius Baisley will be big for this team. Or maybe not big for this team, but this is a big year for him because it gives him potential to kind of get some of those shots that he was getting in OKC and kind of try to revitalize his career as a young player who seemingly has been given up on at this point. Another guy that will be probably a big addition for them is Lonnie Walker. I'd expect him to probably be their sixth man. When you think sixth man, I think like spark plug player off the bench. Yeah, Dorian Finney-Smith might technically get more minutes than him or whatever it is, as a more true sixth man. But Lonnie Walker provides some more guard play off the bench, which outside of Spencer Dinwiddie, so far we haven't really listed a lot of traditional point guard play. Who, again, I think he'll play the two next to Ben Simmons. But yeah, I think Lonnie Walker should be able to play point guard, shooting guard off the bench for you. Averaged 11 points per game last year with the Lakers, kind of showed out for them. I had that, playoff game versus the Warriors in which he really kind of exploded. He's been a solid player, though, for the past few years. It's not like that was a career revitalization or anything. I think he kind of just took the one-year deal to kind of go from there afterwards with the Lakers, right? Maybe to try to do what we saw Malik Monk do, where Malik Monk had a really good year with the Lakers, goes to the Kings, and is now a main part of their young team. But yeah, Lonnie Walker, only about to be 25 years old, still a super young player, and has, developed well since, his rookie season, where he only averaged 2 points per game, to the point now where he's constantly averaging double digits. He's shooting over 30% from the three-point line. He's shooting over 40% from the field. Last year, what I will say was the best thing for him was his efficiency at almost 45% from the field and 36% from three. Clearly his most efficient season, and that's good to see for him continuing to grow as a player, because the more efficient you can be, the less reliant you have to be on being a star, and the better that you're going to fit as a role player, which I do think will be very good for this team. Again, I expect him to kind of be your six-man type of spark plug role off the bench for this team into this next season. Beyond that, though, Dennis Smith Jr. does provide a little bit more point guard play if Lonnie Walker or Cam Thomas isn't giving you what you want off the bench. He did kind of put a little bit more fire back into his career last year in Charlotte. Obviously, the former number 9 overall pick by the Dallas Mavericks just before they got Luka Doncic. Showed a lot of promise for them. Obviously, his best season so far has been his rookie season with the Dallas Mavericks, in which he averaged 15 points per game. After that, kind of got pushed out, just didn't fit well with Luka, because if you have Luka, where do you want the ball? In Dennis Smith Jr.'s hand or in Luka Doncic's hand? Pretty simple. You want it in Luka's hand ever since he's been trying to find his role. And maybe that will be as, a good defender and an athlete, playmaker off the bench for the Nets this next season. The last young player I want to talk about with this team is Day'Ron Sharpe. Provides another option at center off the bench. Beyond that, hasn't been much so far in his career. He's only played 2 years, both in Brooklyn. Averaged 6 points per game his rookie season and 4 points per game last season. Efficiency is not terrible, and he actually can spot up for a corner three occasionally if you needed. But beyond that, he's a solid young center, right? So that's really what you're looking at from Brooklyn entering the 2024 season. A super young, fun, star-studded team that has more potential hidden on the bench and can kind of play with house money, because I don't think they have their first-round pick this year. So whatever success they have is earned on their own and doesn't hurt them entering next season. It only helps them. So honestly, if I had to put a win total for this team, I would say they're going to be around 500. I'd bet close around 41 wins for this team. Maybe a little bit more. I know the bottom of the East can be a little bit tricky, but I do think some teams will jump up and such. If I had to give them a seeding, I would say somewhere between 7 and 10 in that play-in range. But a team that in that play-in range can make some noise and push themselves into the playoffs. So that's what I expect out of the Brooklyn this next season. Super interested to watch. Obviously, the defensive versatility that they offer has got to be the most interesting thing. With that said, let me know, how well do you guys think the Brooklyn Nets are going to do this next season? And do you think Ben Simmons can get back to form, or do you think Mikal Bridges will be an All-Star? Really interested in your guys' thoughts. Anyways, that's going to be it for your boy Dom, and I will catch you on next time. Peace out, guys.
Do you have a name for the finger pointing? Where does that stem from? Because the broadcast, the fans were all loving it.
It's the first time somebody really asked me where I got it from. I've been waiting to explain it, where I got it from. So I got it actually from the Padres. So every time they'll get a double or more, they'll look at their little sideline, the bullpen, whatever, and their dugout, and they would just point and just head turn. And I got in a big little baseball phase. I watch the Phillies all the time, so like I'd be locked. And I'm a big fan of Manny Machado, so watching him getting doubles and stuff like that, I'm just watching the game and I see him just point, just turn their head, and I'm just like, I might add that. I might add it in my own little 3-point way. And I mean, it's stuck. Just happy I'm making threes so I can do it.